Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to journey back in time as we uncover the real story of the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, a symbol so deeply woven into the fabric of American identity that its true history is often shrouded in myth. The story of the Liberty Bell begins in 1751, during a period when the American colonies were growing in both ambition and restlessness. The Pennsylvania Provincial Assembly, seeking to create a powerful symbol for the Pennsylvania State House, what we now call Independence Hall, ordered a large bell from the Whitechapel Bell Foundry in London, England. This bell was intended not just for ceremonial use, but also to summon lawmakers to legislative sessions and alert the public to important announcements or emergencies. The Assembly specified that the bell should be grand, weighing over 2,000 pounds, and crafted from the finest English bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. They also requested a special inscription that would reflect the colony's values of freedom and civil order. The biblical phrase, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof," from the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 10. This powerful message was meant to celebrate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Charter of Privileges, a document that granted important rights and freedoms to the people of Pennsylvania. When the bell finally arrived in Philadelphia in 1752, after a long and perilous transatlantic journey, excitement turned quickly to disappointment. As it was tested upon arrival, the bell cracked on its very first ring. This unexpected flaw was a major setback, embarrassing for both the assembly and the craftsmen who produced it. Instead of shipping the massive object back to England, the Assembly commissioned local metalworkers John Pass and John Stowe to attempt a repair. They melted the bell down and recast it right in Philadelphia, adding some additional copper to strengthen it. Their names were inscribed on the new bell, a quiet but lasting tribute to their craftsmanship. This recast version of the bell, forged by American hands on American soil, would go on to become much more than a signal for meetings. It would evolve into an enduring symbol of American resilience, freedom, and determination, even though it faced flaws right from the very beginning. Shortly after its arrival in Philadelphia in 1752, the Liberty Bell's journey took an unexpected and unfortunate turn. When the newly imported bell was first struck for testing, it cracked almost immediately. Some accounts suggest the crack appeared during the bell's very first ringing, while others propose that imperfections in the casting or damage sustained during the sea voyage weakened its structure before it even reached American soil. Regardless of the exact cause, the crack rendered the bell unsuitable for use, creating both a practical problem and a blow to the city's pride. Faced with the dilemma of a broken bell thousands of miles away from its original makers, the Pennsylvania Provincial Assembly decided against sending it back to London for repairs. Instead, they turned to local founders John Pass and John Stowe, two skilled metalworkers based in Philadelphia. The task was monumental. Melting down a massive bronze bell and successfully recasting it was not a simple undertaking. Nevertheless, Pass and Stowe accepted the challenge. They broke apart the original bell and melted the pieces in a furnace, modifying the composition slightly by adding more copper to the mix in an effort to strengthen it. The resulting new bell was thicker and heavier than the original. In 1753, after weeks of labor, they produced a recast version that carried the same inscription, but now bore their own names as part of the bell's legend. However, even the second version of the bell was not without issues. When tested, it produced a sound that many Philadelphians found unpleasant, often described as a harsh, cracked tone. Some records suggest that a third casting was considered and minor adjustments were made, but eventually, the Assembly accepted the bell as it was. Over time, citizens grew used to its distinct sound, and the bell found its place atop the State House, where it served its original purpose, calling lawmakers to assembly and alerting the city to important events. What started as a story of imperfection and disappointment would, over time, transform into a powerful narrative of resilience and national identity, with the early crack and the determined recasting by American hands becoming a fitting metaphor for the young nation itself. One of the most striking features of the Liberty Bell is the powerful inscription cast around its crown. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof, Leviticus XXV. VX. This phrase, taken from the Bible's book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 10, was carefully chosen by the Pennsylvania Provincial Assembly to reflect the ideals and aspirations of the colony. The original intention behind selecting this biblical quote was tied closely to a historic occasion. In 1751, Pennsylvania was preparing to celebrate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Charter of Privileges, a revolutionary document that granted religious freedom, civil liberties, and the right to self-governance to the people of Pennsylvania. Unlike many charters of its time, Penn's charter emphasized tolerance and the importance of individual rights, making it a foundational text in the early movement toward American democracy. By inscribing the call for liberty across the bell, the Assembly sought to remind both lawmakers and citizens of the core principles upon which the colony was built: freedom, justice, and equal treatment under the law. In its original context, the verse from Leviticus referred to the Jewish tradition of the Jubilee year, a sacred time when enslaved individuals were freed, debts were forgiven, and lands were returned to their original owners. The message symbolized renewal, restoration, and a resetting of societal inequalities, making it an especially profound choice for a colony striving to build a fair and just society. Over the centuries, the meaning of the inscription evolved far beyond its 18th century colonial context. During the 19th century, abolitionists campaigning against slavery seized upon the powerful words, interpreting them as a divine mandate for the emancipation of enslaved people throughout the United States. The inscription, which had originally commemorated Pennsylvania's founding values, took on new life as a rallying cry for universal human rights. The choice of this single verse, ancient, sacred, and deeply rooted in calls for freedom, gave the Liberty Bell a timeless voice. Even as its physical structure faltered and cracked, the words it bears have continued to echo through American history, resonating with each generation's struggle to define and defend liberty. A common myth about the Liberty Bell is that it rang on July 4th, 1776, to celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This has become an iconic piece of American folklore, but in reality, the Liberty Bell was not rung on that historic day. The fact is that the bell's most famous moment came several days later, when it was rung on July 8, 1776, to announce the public reading of the Declaration in the streets of Philadelphia. The decision to ring the bell on July 8th was made in part to inform the citizens of Philadelphia that the Continental Congress had formally adopted the Declaration of Independence. This was a highly anticipated event, and the ringing of the bell was intended to draw the attention of the public to the reading. At the time, the Continental Congress had just finished signing the Declaration, and while it was an incredibly significant moment, the bell did not play a part in the events of July 4th itself. In fact, the bell was only used on special occasions, such as the calling of lawmakers to sessions or important civic events, and was not necessarily tied to every momentous event in the country's early history. Thus, the image of the bell ringing in celebration on July 4th is a misrepresentation that grew in popularity over time. Furthermore, it's important to note that in 1776, the city of Philadelphia was still under British occupation for part of the year, and security concerns may have affected how, when, and why public symbols such as the bell were used. The bell's primary purpose was not yet associated with independence in the way it would later come to be, and its connection to the Declaration grew gradually as the decades went on. The misunderstanding about the bell's role on July 4th likely emerged as the Liberty Bell grew in symbolic importance in the 19th century, particularly during the Abolitionist movement. As people began to associate it with the broader ideals of freedom, independence, and liberty, the story of the bell ringing on July 4th fit perfectly into the growing national narrative of American triumph. This myth, while historically inaccurate, became enshrined in popular culture and continues to persist today. Despite not having rung on July 4th, 1776, the Liberty Bell's significance grew exponentially in the years following the Declaration's adoption. It became synonymous with the struggle for freedom, justice, and liberty, much more than a mere bell used for civic announcements. Its role in American history was reshaped by the evolving ideals of the nation itself. In the years following the American Revolution, the Liberty Bell's role as a symbol of freedom and independence continued to evolve. While it had initially been associated with Pennsylvania's own push for self-governance and the colonial ideals of liberty, its true transformation came in the 19th century, during one of the most tumultuous periods in American history, the fight to abolish slavery. By the time the nation was divided over the issue of slavery, the Liberty Bell had already become a recognized symbol of freedom. However, it wasn't until the 1830s and 1840s that its connection to the abolitionist movement would solidify. Abolitionists, who were seeking the emancipation of enslaved African Americans, adopted the Liberty Bell as an emblem of their cause. They saw the bell's message, the call for liberty for all inhabitants, as a direct challenge to the institution of slavery, which they viewed as an affront to the nation's founding ideals of freedom and equality. The Liberty Bell, with its powerful inscription proclaiming liberty to all people, was a perfect symbol for abolitionists who fought tirelessly for the end of slavery. They argued that the country could not truly claim to be the land of freedom while millions of African Americans were enslaved and denied their basic human rights. The Liberty Bell, which had once been used for governmental purposes, now became a rallying cry for social justice. Abolitionists, including figures like Frederick Douglass, used the image of the Liberty Bell in their speeches and writings, invoking its symbolism to argue that slavery was incompatible with the principles upon which America was founded. The idea that the bell had cracked and would never ring again in the same way was also a metaphor for the fractured nation, torn apart by the institution of slavery. They believed that the bell, though damaged, still had a powerful voice, and that voice would one day ring out for the freedom of all Americans, regardless of race. The bell also became a focal point for abolitionist rallies and demonstrations. In some cases, copies of the Liberty Bell, often referred to as the Abolition Bell, were cast and displayed at meetings, signifying the importance of continuing the struggle for liberty. These events grew in importance as the country's conflict over slavery reached its boiling point, with many abolitionists viewing the bell as a symbol of hope for a future where slavery would no longer exist. Throughout the years, the Liberty Bell's association with abolitionism only strengthened, and it became a central icon in the broader fight for civil rights. Even after the Civil War and the eventual abolition of slavery, the Liberty Bell remained a symbol not just of the nation's independence, but the ongoing struggle for freedom, equality, and justice for all people, regardless of their race or background. The Liberty Bell, once a humble piece of metal cast to announce civic events, had morphed into a profound national symbol, not of a nation's birth, but of its continued journey toward a more just and equitable society. The Liberty Bell's role in American history took on new meaning during and after the Civil War, one of the nation's most transformative and divisive conflicts. By the time the war ended in 1865, the bell had already become an enduring symbol of freedom, but the conclusion of the war marked a new chapter in its symbolic journey, as it resonated with the principles of liberty, equality, and national unity. Throughout the Civil War, the Liberty Bell had remained silent, as its crack rendered it unfit for use. However, despite its physical inability to ring, the bell's symbolic power only grew during these turbulent years. As the war raged on, The bell was repeatedly referenced by both Union and Confederate leaders, each side claiming it as a symbol of their own vision of freedom and justice. For the Union, the bell was a symbol of the hope that one day the nation would be reunited and slavery would be abolished. For the Confederacy, it represented the ideals of states, rights, and the fight for sovereignty. In the end, however, it was the Union's victory and the end of slavery that would forever shape the Liberty Bell's association with freedom and equality. As the final Union victory over the Confederacy became imminent, the country was engulfed in a mix of sorrow, celebration, and hope. The end of the Civil War was not just a political and military victory. It was a moral triumph, as it marked the abolition of slavery and the preservation of the Union. It was at this moment, with the war's end on the horizon, that the Liberty Bell truly came into focus, once more as a symbol of unity and freedom. In the aftermath of the war's conclusion, a national celebration was held, and people from across the country gathered in Philadelphia to witness the bell's continued presence. The crack in the bell had never been repaired, but it stood proudly as a symbol of the hard-won freedoms that the country had just fought for. As people gathered around it, there was a deep sense of reverence and pride in what the bell now represented. Not just the early days of the American Revolution, but also the triumph of the American spirit, the victory of freedom over tyranny, and the realization of the nation's foundational ideals. At the time, there were calls for the Liberty Bell to ring out as a proclamation of peace and freedom, but the crack in its structure made this impossible. Despite its silence, the Liberty Bell's presence during the post-Civil War period was far more powerful than any sound it could have made. It became a rallying point for the newly freed African Americans, many of whom made pilgrimages to see the bell as a testament to the nation's promise of liberty and equality. It was especially meaningful in the context of the Reconstruction period, as the United States worked to rebuild both physically and morally in the aftermath of the war. The Liberty Bell's symbolic significance reached its peak during the Reconstruction era, when the United States was grappling with questions of how to integrate the newly freed black population into the social, political, and economic fabric of the nation. Despite its fractured surface, the bell stood as a symbol of hope for many African Americans, who saw it as a beacon of their newly won freedom and the opportunity for a better future. For them, the bell's crack symbolized the unfinished work of the nation, a reminder that while slavery had ended, the fight for true equality was far from over. In cities across the North, the Liberty Bell was a focal point for public demonstrations, speeches, and gatherings aimed at promoting civil rights and voting rights for African Americans. The bell was referenced in speeches by prominent figures like Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, who used its symbolism to rally support for the rights of Black Americans and to encourage the nation to fulfill its promises of freedom and equality. While the bell remained silent, its role as a symbol of hope, resilience, and justice grew more pronounced as the United States entered the post-war era. In the decades that followed, the Liberty Bell would be increasingly associated with civil rights movements, from the campaigns for black civil rights in the 20th century to the feminist movements advocating for women's suffrage. Each new struggle for equality found resonance in the bell's imperfect surface, symbolizing the long, often painful path toward achieving freedom for all. As time passed and the country continued to evolve, the Liberty Bell's cracked surface began to take on new layers of meaning. It no longer just represented the nation's independence or its early fight for liberty, but became a permanent symbol of the ongoing battle for the rights of those whose voices had been marginalized throughout history. The cracked Liberty Bell encapsulated the reality that while the fight for freedom may have been won in some ways, it was far from complete. The bell's silence in the face of the triumphs and tragedies that followed the Civil War served as a reminder that the pursuit of a more perfect union would always be a work in progress. One of the most defining aspects of the Liberty Bell's long history is its crack, which has become its most iconic feature. The bell's crack, which appeared sometime in the early 1800s, has captured the imagination of generations, symbolizing the imperfection of both the bell itself and the nation it represents. However, what is less often discussed is the series of failed attempts to repair the bell and restore it to its former ringing glory. The most famous crack, which most people recognize today, likely developed sometime between the early 19th century and the 1830s. While the exact timeline and cause of the crack are still the subject of debate among historians, it's generally believed that the bell cracked further during a public event in 1817. Some suggest that the crack could have been a result of cold weather combined with the repetitive tolling of the bell over the years, or it could have been due to a poor casting that failed to hold up under constant use. Regardless of the cause, the result was a serious flaw that permanently silenced the bell and made it impossible to ring again without the risk of further damage. Several attempts to repair the bell were made over the following decades. The first official attempt came in 1817, when a group of local metallurgists attempted to fix the crack by widening it in order to relieve stress. This approach was common at the time, as it was believed that a crack could be mitigated by making it larger, but in this case, it only made matters worse. As the years passed, the bell became less and less functional, as even the smallest toll could exacerbate the damage. The bell, once a symbol of authority and communication, was rendered largely silent. By the mid-19th century, the issue of the bell's crack became a topic of national interest. The cracked bell had already gained symbolic significance due to its association with the nation's struggle for freedom and its role in the abolitionist movement. But despite its symbolic power, there was still a desire to make the bell functional again. In 1846, the last attempt to repair the Liberty Bell took place. This time, the idea was to cast a new piece of metal around the bell's cracked edges to reinforce its structure. However, as soon as the bell was tested, the crack only widened further, confirming the impossibility of restoring the bell to its original state. The final attempt to repair the bell marked the end of any serious consideration of restoring its ability to ring. After that, the decision was made to preserve the bell as a historical artifact, symbolizing the imperfection of freedom and the ongoing struggle for justice in America. No more efforts were made to make the bell ring again, and it was retired from active use. Today, the crack in the Liberty Bell is not just a flaw. It is a defining characteristic. The bell's inability to ring serves as a metaphor for the imperfections that exist in any pursuit of justice, equality, and freedom. It stands as a reminder that even the most enduring symbols of liberty and independence are not perfect, but still hold deep meaning and significance. Despite the failed attempts to restore its functionality, the Liberty Bell remains an irreplaceable symbol, one that continues to resonate with the people of America, not because of its flawless sound, but because of its enduring message of liberty, even in the face of adversity. The Liberty Bell, despite its age, imperfections, and cracked surface, has become one of the most enduring symbols in American history. Its significance transcends its physical appearance, and its legacy has grown over the centuries, taking on new meanings as the country evolved. Today, the Liberty Bell is not just a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing symbol that continues to resonate deeply within the fabric of American society. The bell's legacy began to solidify in the 19th century, particularly as it became a central icon during the abolitionist movement. Abolitionists, as mentioned earlier, used the Liberty Bell as a powerful symbol of the fight for freedom and equality, invoking its message of liberty to draw attention to the horrors of slavery and the need for immediate emancipation. Over time, this symbolism expanded beyond the abolition of slavery. The bell came to represent a broader, more universal vision of freedom, one that encompassed civil rights, women's suffrage, and the struggles of all marginalized communities seeking equality under the law. Today, the Liberty Bell is an emblem of freedom, justice, and the enduring struggle for equality. It stands in stark contrast to the flaws it bears, and this imperfection has come to symbolize the ongoing effort to realize the ideals of liberty for all people, regardless of race, gender, or background. Its cracked surface is not seen as a defect, but rather a powerful metaphor for the journey toward a perfect union, where equality and justice have yet to be fully realized. The bell's place in American culture is secure, with millions of visitors each year traveling to Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia to see the symbol of liberty firsthand. People from all walks of life come to stand before the Liberty Bell, often reflecting on its historical context and the ideals it represents. It serves as a reminder not only of the nation's founding principles, but also of the ongoing work that remains in fulfilling the promises of the American Revolution. In recent years, the Liberty Bell has been invoked in numerous contexts, beyond the realm of politics, as a symbol of resilience and hope. During times of national crisis or division, the bell is often referenced as a call to unity and the need for the nation to return to its foundational values. It has appeared in protests, rallies, and movements, where it is used to symbolize the fight for freedom and justice for all. For instance, it has been associated with immigration reform, as advocates for the rights of immigrants point to the Liberty Bell's message of liberty for all inhabitants as a reason to ensure that America remains a welcoming place for people of all nations and backgrounds. The bell is also prominently featured during July 4 celebrations, where it symbolizes both the birth of a nation and the ongoing quest to perfect it. Additionally, the Liberty Bell continues to inspire conversations about the role of freedom in a modern democracy. In an era marked by complex challenges such as racial inequality, economic disparity, and political division, the Liberty Bell's presence serves as a moral compass, reminding citizens that the pursuit of liberty is not just about history, but about the everyday struggle to ensure that the promises of equality and justice are realized for everyone. In educational settings, the Liberty Bell is often used as a teaching tool to engage young people with the nation's founding principles. It's presented as a symbol of what America stands for and as a challenge for future generations to continue to strive toward the ideals it represents. It also prompts discussions about the country's imperfections and the importance of civil activism in pushing the nation toward a more just and equitable society. In popular culture, the bell's image continues to be synonymous with freedom. From political cartoons to advertisements, the Liberty Bell's cracked image is often invoked to represent not just freedom, but the resilience of the American spirit. Its powerful symbolism extends beyond the boundaries of history, remaining relevant in the ongoing national conversations about civil rights, the role of government, and the quest for liberty. The Liberty Bell's legacy continues to be written, as its symbolism is reinterpreted and redefined in the context of each new struggle for justice. From its origins as a bell that called lawmakers to order, to its place as an enduring national symbol of liberty, it stands today as a reminder that freedom is not an achieved state, but an ongoing journey. The bell's cracked surface, far from diminishing its value, enhances its symbolism, representing the imperfections of a nation and the unfinished work that continues to unfold. The Liberty Bell's journey from a symbol of colonial independence to a powerful emblem of freedom, equality, and justice has cemented its place in the heart of American history. Its crack, once seen as a flaw, has come to represent the imperfections of the nation it symbolizes, imperfections that continue to challenge the ideals of liberty and equality. Yet, it is through these very imperfections that the bell speaks most loudly. It serves as a timeless reminder that the quest for true freedom is not easily won, but is an ongoing struggle, one that requires constant reflection, action, and the courage to correct injustices when they arise. As we stand before the Liberty Bell today, we are not just observing a relic of the past, but engaging with a living symbol, one that encourages us to continue working toward a more perfect union, where the principles of liberty and justice apply to all people without exception. The bell's enduring presence challenges each new generation to honor the sacrifices made by those who came before, while also ensuring that the promises of freedom and equality are extended to those yet to be fully included. Thus, the Liberty Bell continues to ring in the hearts and minds of Americans, not in sound, but in meaning. Its legacy, ever evolving, reminds us that freedom is a journey, imperfect, ongoing, and always worth fighting for.